Welcome to Hack Gear, where we decode cybersecurity and the cognitive battle space and break it down to what really matters.
I'm Alice AI.
And I'm Bob AI. Imagine a cargo ship, just a regular one, sailing out on the ocean. Looks like it's just moving goods, right?
Yeah.
But what if it's actually something else? Like maybe a hidden command center, secretly pulling strings in major world events. Today, that's exactly what we're diving into. This fascinating, kind of shadowy world of maritime intelligence. And we're focusing on one ship in particular, the MV Behshad.
Yeah, our mission today is really to unpack this vessel story. We're looking at its suspected role in intelligence ops, especially near that critical choke point, the Bab al-Mandab Strait and the Red Sea. And, its alleged connection to those disruptive shipping attacks, plus this really unprecedented cyber attack it faced.
Right. It's a story that tells us a lot about how naval power is changing and how information warfare at sea works today. It's subtle stuff.
It's something subtle.
And to guide us through this, we've looked at a whole range of sources. Great reports from the Maritime Executive, the Lowy Institute, and some really, really insightful analysis from the What's Going On with Shipping YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah. Big thanks to Salmer Coliano there. His analysis is top-notch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's start with the ship itself, this enigma, the MV Behshad. What are we looking at on paper?
Okay, so on paper, it's pretty straightforward. Built in 1999, flagged to Iran, listed as a general cargo ship. Specs are, 174 meters long, 26 wide, about 16,700 gross tons, standard stuff.
But those stats don't really tell the whole story, do they?
Not even close. That's what makes it interesting. The difference between how it looked and what it was allegedly doing. It actually sailed under a few different names before: Behshad Bianca, Magnolia, Seaflower, Limnetic, Iran Seastan. But yeah, despite that commercial registration, the U.S. Treasury flagged it. They suspected it was basically a command post, a spy ship for Iran's IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps.
The IRGC, okay.
And also maybe a front for the state-owned shipping line, IRSL. That's why it ended up under U.S. sanction.
On the official line.
They've insistently denied it. They say, nope, just anti-piracy work off Somalia.
But analysts weren't buying it.
Not really. They pointed to, well, weird activity patterns. Ships don't usually move like that. And there were reports of uniformed personnel seen on board, things that just didn't quite fit the anti-piracy narrative.
It makes you wonder how well you can actually hide a ship's true purpose these days with all the monitoring.
That's a key point, because the data eventually starts to tell a story. The Behshad really popped onto the radar in 2021. It took over from another Iranian ship, the MV Saviz.
Ah, the Saviz. I remember that one. Also suspected of intel gathering.
Exactly. The Saviz had been hanging around the Bab al-Mandab Strait since 2016. But then, April 2021, it got damaged. Suspected Israeli limpet mine attack.
Oh.
And then, just 9 days later, boom, the Behshad arrives. Almost like a seamless handover.
9 days. That's quick. And its movements weren't exactly typical cargo runs either, right?
Far from it. It was noted sailing these erratic courses, sometimes in literal patrol boxes out in the Gulf of Aden. And get this, it operated without going back to a home port from June 2021 all the way until January 2024.
Whoa, wait. Over 2.5 years just out there.
Yeah.
Circling.
Pretty much. Highly unusual for any commercial vessel. Think about maintenance, crew changes, supplies.
Something doesn't add up there for just a cargo ship.
Precisely. And this odd behavior gets even more significant when you overlay it with the situation that blew up in the Red Sea. Remember, starting November 2023, Houthi rebels in Yemen began launching attack after attack on merchant shipping in the Red Sea and nearby waters.
Right, and that had a huge impact on global trade. Massive.
Absolutely massive. Suez Canal traffic just plummeted. We're talking from maybe 73 ships a day down to around 33 by mid-December 23.
Forcing ships the long way around Africa. Huge delays, huge costs.
Exactly. And while the Houthis said they were targeting British, U.S., Israeli ships or ships linked to Israeli ports, well, a lot of other vessels got hit too.
Yeah, including ships that seem totally unconnected, right? Chinese ones, even those dark fleet tankers operating off the grid.
Correct. Which brings us back to the Behshad. This is where it allegedly played the role of the shadow hand. The suspicion is it was feeding crucial real-time intelligence to the Houthis for these attacks.
Okay, how would it do that? What kind of gear did it have?
Well, think about this. Multiple radars mounted unusually high up on its masts. That gives you a much better detection range, maybe 50 to 100 nautical miles. Plus, a satellite receiver supposedly capable of getting 1-meter resolution images from Iran's Khayyam satellite.
1 meter res, okay.
And crucially, the ability to communicate potentially with Houthi fishing boats, maybe using them as proxies, or even launch its own small boats for scouting missions.
So it could basically build a really detailed picture of who was sailing where.
Precisely. It could take the standard AIS data, the automatic identification system signals ships broadcast, and fuse that with its own radar contacts. So it could track ships even if they turn their AIs off trying to go dark.
That's key. So it could see the ships trying to be invisible.
That's the idea. And there are specific allegations linking it to major incidents.
Like what?
Reports suggest involvement in the hijacking of that Israeli-owned car carrier, the Galaxy Leader, in November 23.
Right, I remember the footage of helicopters landing on that.
That one. Also, potentially coordinating the missile strike on the Marlin Luanda, a tanker.
Okay.
And being just 43 nautical miles away during the fatal attack on the MV True Confidence.
That close?
Yeah.
Wow. The Wall Street Journal even reported it was directing attacks, didn't they?
They did. December 2023, reporting it was providing that real-time targeting intel to the Houthis.
And there was visual evidence, too, from Sal Mercogliano.
Yeah, this is fascinating. His channel, What's Going On with Shipping, he showed marine traffic data from January 9th, 2024. It showed the Behshad moving in these very specific patterns right there in the southern Red Sea and that narrow zone where ships get closest to Yemen.
Patterns that didn't look random.
Not at all. He described it very clearly as looking like it was spotting for the Houthi, just loitering and watching in a key area.
And Iran itself seemed pretty protective of this cargo ship, right?
Extremely. Their UN representative basically warned the U.S., don't touch this ship. And even more telling, there was this video put out by the Iranian military itself describing the Behshad as a floating armory.
A floating armory, even though it looked like a regular bulk carrier.
Exactly. Quite a contrast between the official denial and that kind of description.
So with all this suspicion, all this attention, it feels like something had to give.
It did. The ship itself became a target, not with a mine or a missile, but with something different, a cyber attack.
Okay, tell us about that. When did this happen?
This was late January, early February 2024. The United States carried out a covert cyber attack against the MV Behshad.
Covert, okay. And this was linked to other events in the region.
Yes, it came as part of the U.S. response to that drone attack on Tower 22. That was the U.S. outpost in Jordan, where 3 American service members were killed on January 28th.
Right. A very serious incident.
Very. And U.S. officials basically said the cyber attack was meant to disrupt Iran's ability to communicate with the Houthis, to pass them that targeting intelligence we talked about.
Especially since Iran had already warned the U.S. not to target the ship. So, high stakes.
Very high stakes. And it seemed to have an immediate effect on the Behshad's behavior.
What happened? Did it just stop transmitting?
Well, it left its usual patrol spot off Djibouti for a while. Then, interestingly, in early February, it was seen docked near the Chinese military base in Djibouti.
Near the Chinese base. Why there?
Military analysts speculated that was a deliberate move. Maybe hoping the proximity to the Chinese base would deter the U.S. from any further action, like trying to board it or attack it physically, sort of seeking cover.
Makes sense. A strategic parking spot.
Perhaps. But it didn't stay there forever. By April 18th, 2024, after being constantly at sea for nearly 3 years...
3 years.
It finally started sailing back home to Bandar Abbas in Iran, and it's apparently stayed there since.
Why head home then?
Analysts pointed out the timing. This was around when Israel was deciding how to respond to Iranian attacks. The thinking was, maybe the Behshad had just become too visible, too high-profile a target to leave exposed out there.
Pulling a key piece off the board before it gets taken.
It was something like that. But here's the thing. The Behshad leaves, yet the Houthi attacks on shipping, they continued, pretty much without missing a beat.
So taking out the Behshad, or at least disrupting it, didn't stop the attacks.
Apparently not, which strongly suggests that whatever intel gathering role it had was likely just handed off. Maybe to other Iranian vessels, possibly smaller ones, harder to track, more anonymous.
It really points to that adaptable, asymmetric approach Iran uses, doesn't it?
Absolutely. They're not necessarily relying on big, obvious platforms.
Like those converted merchant ships Iran has shown off, the drone carriers. Shahid Madavi, Shahid Bagheri.
Exactly. Those look intimidating, but they're also really vulnerable if seriously challenged. The fact that those weren't deployed in this Red Sea scenario, while something like the Behshad was, tells you a lot about their preference for these more deniable, asymmetric tactics.
So this whole Behshad saga, it's not happening in a vacuum. It fits into a bigger picture of Iranian actions at sea, right?
Oh, definitely. This is part of a much larger pattern of Iran interfering with commercial shipping, going back years. You remember the seizure of the British tanker Stena Impero in 2019?
Yes.
Or the South Korean tanker in 2021. And then in May 2022, they seized 2 Greek tankers, the Delta Poseidon and Prudent Warrior, right in the Persian Gulf.
And Iran was pretty open about why they took the Greek tankers, weren't they?
They were. Iran's supreme leader stated very explicitly it was direct retaliation for the U.S. confiscating Iranian oil from a tanker near Greece, one operated by Russia. Tit for tat.
It almost sounds like echoes of the old tanker war during the Iran-Iraq conflict.
It draws a really interesting parallel. Back in the 80s, during the tanker war, you had over 100 ships hit per year. Yet, somehow the oil kept flowing, for the most part.
It shows a weird kind of resilience in global trade, even amid conflict.
It does. It also brings up these really tangled legal and ethical questions, this whole piracy versus sanctions enforcement debate.
Yeah, like the U.S. using ships flagged in, say, Liberia to seize and offload Iranian oil.
Right. That tactic is sometimes seen as a way to avoid direct U.S. flag involvement, keeping some distance. And it's worth remembering, the U.S. isn't actually a signatory to the main treaty governing this stuff, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS.
Which defines things like freedom of navigation. So the legal landscape is murky.
Very murky. And the whole situation creates these strange side effects, too.
You mentioned something earlier, this flight to the flag idea. What's that about?
Yeah, it's this weird trend observers noticed in the Red Sea. Some commercial ships started changing their AIS broadcast information to identify themselves as, like, Chinese company or having Chinese crew.
Why would they do that?
The thinking is, they were hoping the Houthis might be less likely to target a ship perceived as Chinese-linked. Basically, trying to signal, don't shoot me, by associating with a nation they thought might be safer.
Wow. Desperate times. It really shows how the dynamics are shifting out there.
It really does. And amidst all this high-level strategy and geopolitics, we absolutely have to remember the human cost. The mariners actually sailing these ships.
Yeah, the crew's caught in the middle.
Exactly. They're navigating these incredibly dangerous waters, often without getting any extra hazard pay or war risk pay.
That seems crazy.
It is. And there are practical communication problems, too. Commercial ships often don't have the secure comms gear needed to easily coordinate with the naval warships providing protection, the Overwatch.
So there's a disconnect between the protectors and the protected.
There can be. And the danger is real. Look at U.S.-flagged ships even. Military supply ships like the USNS Private Dwayne T. Williams, they've had to divert. Go the long way around Africa, thousands of extra miles, instead of risking the Red Sea and Suez.
Even U.S. military vessels are avoiding it.
Well, these are civilian-crewed military prepositioning ships. It shows the U.S. Navy deciding not to risk American merchant mariners, and it also shows just how effective the Houthi threat has become at disrupting this vital route.
So, pulling it all together, what does the Behshad story really tell us?
I think it's a really clear snapshot of the instability we're seeing at critical maritime choke points all over the world. It's not just Suez and Bab al-Mandab. Think about the Straits of Hormuz, the Black Sea with the Ukraine war, the Baltic, the South China Sea.
Yeah, tensions seem high everywhere vital shipping lanes pass through.
Exactly. And it's all impacting global trade, supply chains, everything.
What the Behshad story really drives home for me isn't just, a cargo ship can be a spy ship. It's more about how the nature of power at sea is evolving. It's not just about aircraft carriers anymore. It's about using seemingly ordinary things in extraordinary ways, blurring those lines between commercial and military.
That blurring of lines is key. Every vessel potentially becomes part of this information warfare landscape.
So for you listening, maybe the big takeaway is just how fast things are changing out there on the water.
Yeah, it's not just about brute force. It's about deception, information, using the existing maritime system against itself, and understanding this complex web of state actors, non-state actors like the Houthis, all vying for control over the trade routes that, frankly, keep our global economy running.
It affects everything, from the price of gas to whether the stuff you ordered online shows up on time.
Absolutely. And the Behshad story, its different roles, the cyber attack, it really makes you wonder what's next.
Right. What does the next generation of these ghost ships or covert maritime ops look like? How do countries adapt to this constant competition and information warfare at sea?
It's definitely a space where we all need to be paying closer attention. Vigilance and just understanding what's happening seems more critical than ever.
Couldn't agree more. And once again, a big thank you to Sal Mercoliano and his What's Going On with Shipping channel. His insights were really invaluable for putting this all together.
Absolutely. Great stuff. If you enjoyed this fact-check discussion, be sure to like and subscribe to Hack Gear for more.